Going to be working on a '05 Chevy Avalanche today, and I got it jacked up a little bit, just enough to. I already crawled under here before I jacked it up and looked around. I'm just going to show quickly what it is before I put the jack stands under it. We got a brake line leaking. That's what this puddle is, and here's the brake line right there, and he had put some fluid in it and drove it over here, and that's that brake line there, and where it goes is to right over that little cross member thing there. It's going to connect to a rubber brake hose right there. I'm waiting for this thing to focus a little better there. I think it is now. And that rubber one goes right here to this little junction block that splits off and goes down both sides of the differential into the brakes on the rear wheels. So it's just it's the only brake line actually that comes to the back of the vehicle. Now, my experience in the past is when a brake line has rusted through like this, it's tricky to find a piece of the brake line farther towards the front, a piece of that same brake line that's any good, that I can cut off and graft a new brake line in from that point. I can't get under here just yet because of YouTube. I have to use jack stands. I mean, it's not their law, but it's just all the trolls, to show where it would be up in the front of the where's my finger, in the front of the gas tank there. Up there, there's a place on the frame where several brake lines come together into one block up there. So at worst, I would have to tap into that block up there, and the right way to do it, which is, this truck is too old for that, would be to take the fuel tank down and find that brake line on top of the frame and fish it all the way down. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to find the best shortcut I can find to fish new brake lines down without taking anything off in the front. But let me go ahead and get some jack stands under this thing, and I'll show that block up there in the front where these brake lines all come together. Okay, there's your jack stand, and although this vehicle does sit high enough that I can crawl around under here without it being jacked up, but the reason I'm jacking it up is because I'm going to take that tire off back there so I have room to work. But this is this block, and I don't even know what it is. It looks like it's got a motor on it around. So I don't know what this thing is. I quit working on cars before this crap came out. But anyway, it's this line right here, when it loops around and heads towards the back. The rest of these go towards the front. I don't know what this thing is. But I do know how to graft in a brake line. Now, just feeling this line with my fingers, just feeling it, it feels kind of rough, and that it might be hard to even find a place anywhere along this line that I can cut and put a union on. And I don't know if this this nut here that screws this line into this, whatever this unit is, I don't know if that nut's the same size that's on a new brake line or not. So I may have to reuse this same nut. Don't know yet. Hopefully, when I get that tire off, I might get lucky and find a place back there that I can tap into, and I won't even have to run a brake line all the way up here. So let me get that wheel off. Let's see what I find. Okay, we got the wheel off, and I could unbolt this plastic piece, take all these screws out, but right now I'm just going to pull it down. And let's see here, we got a wiring loom. Got to do it with one hand, I'm holding the camera. Just to see. Pull this down far enough out of the way to see that brake line. Yeah, that's my brake line right there. I gotta see if I can find a piece that I could sand down smooth enough to make a junction on it. There might be a piece down here. I think down here I might be smooth enough to do that, but I can't work with this thing. This will have to come off to be able to work in there. I've got this wiring harness unhooked from these snaps and clamps that it goes in, and I've pushed it back a little ways. Pushed it back on the other side here, and this brake line is kind of in a little hook right here that's part of this snap for the wiring harness. But right here where I'm rubbing my fingers seems to have the most area that's smooth enough. I'm not sure, maybe up here, I'm not sure though. But the rest of this up here is pretty rough, and I'm not going to be able to sand that down smooth enough to put a union or a coupler on that. So it's looking like it's going to be right here, and in order to work with that I've got to make sure that it's unhooked down here as far as I can get and have room to bend it out here. So I'll probably unsnap it. If you can see my fingers back in here. I don't know if it'll focus for me, but there's where this snap right here that I'm flexing, that the wiring harness goes in, right behind it there's a place for the brake line. I'll probably unhook it from that little retainer there. It's just like this one. And this one, we'll just cut it off up here someplace, pull this thing out carefully to where I have room to work on it. We'll clean this off with a piece of black sandpaper, like some, probably start out lightly, loosely with like a piece of 180 or something, and then get a piece of like 240 or 320 and smoothly work on it more to get a smooth, shiny surface that I can put a coupler on, a union on. Before I cut this line off, I'm going to go back here under the back of the truck, this rubber line here. Okay, if I get up over the top of this, right here where my, let's see, right here where my thumb is, that is where it screws in. That's where it screws in to a solid mounting bracket that is on the cross member up here, and from there the back side of that has the rubber hose that flexes up and down on the differential. So anyway, I'm going to unbolt this up here. I got to get that one off up there, and if I can't do it with a line wrench, then what I do is I go ahead and just cut the line off there and do it with a socket wrench. But I should be able to get that off with a line wrench. I'm going to see if I can get a line wrench up there where I can reach that. Don't know if I can. I'm going to try. Okay. And oh well, I gotta break that loose, but I also have to measure, see how much brake line I need and exactly what size it is. Looks like it might be 1/4 inch. I thought I was going to have to bail on this project, but it looks like I'm going to make it, I think. There's my 9/16 wrench on the nut. It's an open end. I can't get to it from this side. This plate doesn't come off, it's welded on. There's obviously no room to work on top of this plate, so I'm doing it from behind this cross member, and these never come off with an open end, but I had to try it, and it's coming off. Because if that didn't work, then the only other option would be to just leave it up there and just replace this rubber line right here, which they probably won't have because it's got 3-way block on it, and it bolts onto this differential bracket here. I would have to replace that and just leave it loose up there, just tie it on with zip ties or something, but looks like I might be able to actually, this is coming loose. Not to say that I'm home free and I still won't have to replace all of that, but let's see what happens here. And I'm going to have fun getting that line, a new line started up there. Naturally, I'll get it in there before I, just one little bit of a turn at a time. I got to flip the wrench over and keep doing it. But hey, it's moving. Okay, we'll go ahead and take it out there. Got that loose, and got this wiring harness kind of out of a couple more places that hold it on. So I'm going to go on up here and cut that brake line up there, and get this out, see if we can copy the shape of that, make a new one. I got the brake line pulled out on this side. Now that we got it unhooked, I had to bend it a little bit to get it away from some things that it was hitting. But we got it over here on this side. It's loose now, and the smoothest place that I have access to is the most important thing that I find. All of this is too rough. I can't do nothing with none of that. Never get a coupler to stay on that. Right here seems to be the smoothest. It's too rough up there. Right here is it. That's the best I'm going to do, is right in here. I'm going to go ahead and cut this off. First I'm going to polish it down with some sandpaper, because I can take like a shoe shine cloth and just work back and forth wrapped around that, pulling on it with both hands while it's together. Once I get it cut and there's just an end sticking out, it's not as easy to polish it as it is when it's still long like that. So I'm going to go ahead and polish this up a little bit and then cut that off. I'm going to start out with a piece of 180 folded in half. I'm just going to, I'll put it on the tripod for that, and I got a piece of 400 that I'm going to do. But the 180 I'm not going to do hard, I'm just going to do it lightly, and this is a used piece, so it's not as sharp anyway. I'm going to do the same thing with the 400 after I get this rough stuff off of there. Okay, we got that about as clean as what's practical. It's still slightly pitted, but it'll be alright. One thing that's in my favor, even if it did have just a very, very slight seepage on here, that would be under extreme pressure from inside the brake line. but it won't be able to suck air in because, well, atmospheric pressure is only 14 pounds. That's not very much air pressure out here that could go into a vacuum of any kind, but there's hundreds of pounds of pressure, of brake fluid pressure on that line, so it's highly unlikely. It won't suck any vacuum in, but it might. If we don't get a real good seal, we might see a slight little bit of moisture there, as long as it's not wet and dripping. As long as it's just a slight little moisture stain, then I'm not worried about that.